This video is based exclusively on official law enforcement statements, court documents, and verified reporting from major news outlets.
At 1:47 a.m., someone approached the front door of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie's home in the Catalina Foothills outside Tucson, Arizona. Within minutes, she was gone. Security footage captured a masked figure standing on her porch in the middle of the night. Investigators would later confirm that Nancy did not leave voluntarily. Blood was found at the scene. And the case quickly shifted from a missing person investigation to a suspected abduction. But one of the most unusual pieces of evidence in this case was not the surveillance video. It was something inside Nancy's chest. Nancy Guthrie had a pacemaker, a small medical device designed to regulate her heartbeat. Like many modern pacemakers, it was connected to her phone through Bluetooth, transmitting health data continuously. And at exactly 2:28 a.m., that signal stopped syncing with her phone. For investigators, that moment became a critical timestamp. But what many people didn't realize is that the pacemaker itself did not stop transmitting. Even now, weeks after Nancy disappeared, the device may still be sending out a signal somewhere in the Arizona desert. And that signal has triggered a search operation involving helicopters, specialized detection technology, and digital evidence from cell towers. Tonight, we're breaking down what investigators know about that signal, why it matters, and why authorities believe it could still lead them to Nancy Guthrie. Because sometimes the most important witness in an investigation isn't a person, it's a machine.
To understand why Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker has become such a central element in this investigation, we have to go back to the morning her family realized something was wrong. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old and lived alone in a quiet neighborhood in the Catalina Foothills area, just outside Tucson, Arizona. The Catalina Foothills is known for its elevated desert terrain, large residential properties, and winding hillside roads that cut through rocky landscapes. It's a place where many homes are built far apart from each other. Some properties sit hundreds of feet away from the nearest neighbor. And at night, large portions of the area become extremely dark. Unlike typical suburban neighborhoods filled with streetlights, sidewalks, and constant traffic, many roads in the Catalina Foothills have little or no public lighting. Residents often choose to live there specifically because of the privacy and quiet environment. But that same privacy can create challenges if something goes wrong. During the overnight hours, it is not unusual for entire stretches of road to remain completely empty for long periods of time. According to investigators, the events that led to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance began during the early hours of February 1st. At approximately 1:47 a.m., a security camera captured a man standing at Nancy's front door. The footage came from a doorbell camera installed at the entrance of the home. In the video, the individual appears to be wearing a mask and dark clothing. Investigators also noted that he was carrying what appeared to be a backpack and possibly a firearm. The footage itself is brief, but it immediately raised concerns for investigators. Because according to law enforcement, Nancy Guthrie did not leave her home voluntarily that night. At some point after that moment on camera, Nancy disappeared. When family members realized something was wrong later that morning, they contacted authorities. Officers from the Pima County Sheriff's Department responded to the residents and began assessing the situation. Very quickly, the investigation took a serious turn. Inside and around the entrance of the home, investigators discovered blood that was later confirmed to belong to Nancy. That discovery immediately shifted the situation from a missing person case to a potential abduction. Detectives began processing the property as a crime scene, Investigators searched the home, collected evidence, and began gathering surveillance footage from the surrounding area. But one piece of information stood out almost immediately, and it came from Nancy's medical device. Nancy Guthrie had a pacemaker implanted in her chest. Pacemakers are small electronic devices designed to regulate heart rhythm for patients who suffer from certain cardiac conditions. The device monitors the heartbeat and sends electrical impulses if it detects an irregular rhythm. In recent years, many pacemakers have been designed to work alongside smartphone applications. Through Bluetooth technology, the pacemaker can connect to a phone and transmit health data that doctors or patients can monitor remotely. The connection allows the device to sync information about heart activity, battery status, and other medical metrics. Nancy's pacemaker had been paired with her iPhone. Under normal circumstances, that connection would remain active as long as both devices stayed within Bluetooth range. In most environments, that range is roughly 30 to 50 feet. But investigators reviewing the digital data discovered something important. At exactly 2:28 a.m., the pacemaker stopped syncing with Nancy's phone. That moment has since become one of the most important timestamps in the entire investigation, because it provides a digital marker for when something changed. There are several possible explanations for why that connection would suddenly stop. One possibility is that Nancy moved outside Bluetooth range of the phone. Another possibility is that the phone remained inside the house while Nancy was taken somewhere else. A third possibility is that the phone itself stopped functioning, whether due to damage, loss of power, or intentional interference. But regardless of the exact cause, the result was the same. At 2:28 a.m., the pacemaker and the phone were no longer communicating. Investigators believe that moment likely represents either the time Nancy was removed from the home or the moment the phone was separated from her. But the pacemaker itself did not stop working. And that distinction is critical. Pacemakers operate using internal batteries designed to last several years. These devices are built to function continuously, maintaining heart rhythm even if external monitoring systems fail. In other words, the pacemaker does not rely on the phone to keep operating. Even if the Bluetooth connection is lost, the device continues doing its job. And because it continues functioning, it can also continue transmitting signals. Every wireless device emits small electronic transmissions when it is active. Phones search for networks. Smartwatches broadcast Bluetooth signals. Laptops announce their presence to nearby devices. Pacemakers operate in a similar way. As long as the battery has power, the internal electronics continue broadcasting low-energy signals that can potentially be detected by specialized equipment. This is where the investigation enters unusual territory. Because most criminal investigations rely on traditional forms of evidence, fingerprints, surveillance video, eyewitness testimony, or DNA. But in this case, investigators were also dealing with a medical device that could still be transmitting an electronic signal somewhere in the environment. And if that signal could be detected, it might reveal something critical. The location of the pacemaker, which could also mean the location of Nancy. During the early days of the investigation, search teams began combing through areas surrounding Nancy's home. Officers canvassed nearby neighborhoods, interviewed residents, and reviewed footage from home security systems, traffic cameras, and commercial properties. But the terrain around Tucson presents enormous challenges for search operations. The Arizona desert is vast. Pima County alone covers more than 9,000 square miles, an area larger than several U.S. states. Much of that terrain consists of open desert, rocky hillsides, and remote areas where few people travel regularly. Wind, sand, and extreme temperatures can quickly erase physical traces like footprints or tire marks. And large sections of land can go days or even weeks without any human activity at all. That means if someone wanted to hide evidence or conceal a body, the environment itself could make detection extremely difficult. Because of those challenges, investigators began exploring a different approach. Instead of searching randomly across massive areas of desert terrain, they would try to narrow the search using technology. If Nancy's pacemaker was still broadcasting a signal, it might be possible to detect it using specialized equipment. And that equipment exists. Law enforcement agencies sometimes use devices known as signal sniffers, tools designed to detect electronic transmissions from nearby devices. These systems can scan for Bluetooth signals and identify where those signals are coming from. In the days after Nancy disappeared, investigators began deploying helicopters equipped with signal detection technology. The aircraft flew over sections of the Arizona desert scanning for electronic signatures that could match the pacemaker's signal. The idea was simple. If the device was somewhere within range, the equipment might detect it. But at the same time those aerial searches were happening, investigators were also examining another type of digital evidence. Evidence that might reveal where to search next. Because while Nancy's pacemaker may still have been transmitting signals into the desert, someone else's phone may have been transmitting signals too. Signals recorded by nearby cell towers during the exact same window of time when Nancy disappeared. And according to investigators, those digital breadcrumbs may point toward a very specific location. They needed a reason to search somewhere specific, because the Arizona desert surrounding Tucson is enormous. Even with helicopters and signal detection technology, scanning thousands of square miles randomly would be extremely inefficient. This is where another type of digital evidence becomes important. Cell tower data. Every mobile phone constantly communicates with nearby cellular towers. Even when a user is not actively making calls or sending messages, the phone periodically connects to towers to maintain network service. Each time a connection occurs, the cellular network records information about that interaction. Which tower received the signal, which sector of the tower was used, the strength of the signal, and the exact time of the connection. When investigators obtain legal authorization to review this information, they can begin reconstructing where certain phones traveled during a specific time window. The data is not precise enough to identify a specific address, but it can place a phone within a geographic zone. If a phone connects to Tower A at one time, and then Tower B several minutes later, investigators can infer that the device moved between those coverage areas. In many cases, those transitions allow analysts to build a timeline of movement, and that appears to be what investigators began doing in the hours and days after Nancy disappeared. Somewhere within the digital records from the early morning hours of February 1st, analysts identified phone activity that appeared to move away from Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood. The specific phone or phones involved have not been publicly identified. Law enforcement has not disclosed whose device generated those signals. But according to multiple reports, the movement pattern suggested travel away from the Catalina Foothills area toward more remote desert terrain. And that information produced something investigators rarely get in cases like this: coordinates. Not exact GPS coordinates, but a general area where a device connected to cellular infrastructure during the time window surrounding Nancy's disappearance. For investigators, that kind of digital breadcrumb can be extremely valuable, because it narrows the search. Instead of looking everywhere, authorities can focus resources on a location that the data suggests may be relevant. At some point during the investigation, that information led law enforcement to organize a search operation outside Pima County. The mission involved a partner agency in a neighboring county and specialized equipment capable of detecting Bluetooth transmissions. Investigators provided the agency with specific instructions. Take the signal detection technology. Travel to the location indicated by the cell tower data. Search the area and attempt to locate the electronic signal coming from Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker. The operation was not random, it was targeted. According to reporting about the investigation, teams deployed the signal detection equipment in a remote section of desert terrain miles away from Nancy's home. The technology works by scanning the environment for Bluetooth advertisements, short electronic signals emitted by wireless devices. When the receiver detects a signal, it can begin triangulating the source. The closer the equipment gets to the transmitting device, the stronger the signal becomes. In theory, investigators could use that process to narrow down the exact location of the pacemaker. But there are important limitations. Bluetooth signals are relatively weak compared to cellular transmissions. In typical conditions, the range might be around 30 to 50 feet. In open environments with specialized receivers, that distance may extend further. However, if the device is buried underground, placed inside a structure, or shielded by terrain, the signal could become extremely difficult to detect. Despite those limitations, investigators believed the possibility was strong enough to justify deploying the technology. Helicopters and ground teams searched the targeted area using the signal detection equipment. The mission lasted several hours, but according to reports from sources familiar with the operation, the search did not produce the result investigators were hoping for. No pacemaker signal was detected, no physical evidence was discovered, and no indication of Nancy Guthrie's location was found in that area. At first glance, that might sound like a failure, but in investigations like this, negative results still provide useful information, because every location that is eliminated helps narrow the list of possibilities. If the pacemaker signal was not detected at the coordinates suggested by the cell tower data, several explanations could exist. One possibility is that the data was incomplete or misinterpreted. Cell tower analysis can identify general movement patterns, but it cannot always determine the precise location where a device ultimately stopped. Another possibility is that the pacemaker was never in that area at all. The phone activity may belong to someone unrelated to the crime, a driver passing through the region, a resident traveling home, or someone whose digital footprint simply overlapped with the timeline investigators were analyzing. There is also a third possibility. The pacemaker could still be broadcasting, but from a location where the signal cannot easily be detected. If the device is underground, inside a vehicle, or shielded by dense terrain, the Bluetooth signal might be too weak to register during aerial scanning. This is one of the challenges investigators face when relying on wireless signals. Detection is not guaranteed. But the fact that authorities conducted such a targeted search reveals something important about the state of the investigation. It shows that investigators are not relying solely on traditional evidence. They are combining multiple forms of digital information, cell tower records, Bluetooth signal detection, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence collected from the scene. Each piece alone may not reveal the full story, but together, they begin forming a clearer picture of what may have happened after Nancy Guthrie disappeared from her home. And as investigators continue analyzing that data, one question remains central to the case. If Nancy's pacemaker is still transmitting somewhere, why hasn't anyone found the signal yet? Because the answer to that question may reveal something investigators are already beginning to consider: the possibility that this case involves far more planning than it initially appeared. By the time investigators began searching the desert for the pacemaker signal, the investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance had already reached a critical stage. Weeks had passed. Search teams had combed through large areas of terrain. Thousands of tips had been submitted to law enforcement. And according to reports, investigators were now reviewing more than 10,000 hours of surveillance footage collected from homes, businesses, and traffic cameras throughout the region. At the same time, The FBI and local authorities had also begun processing physical evidence recovered during the early days of the investigation. One of the most significant pieces of that evidence was a glove discovered several miles away from Nancy Guthrie's home. Investigators believe the glove may match the type worn by the masked individual seen on the doorbell camera footage. More importantly, the glove reportedly contained male DNA. That DNA did not match anyone known to be closely associated with Nancy, which means it could belong to the person responsible for the abduction or someone connected to the crime. Rather than relying only on traditional database comparisons, investigators have reportedly begun using genetic genealogy techniques to analyze that DNA. Genetic genealogy works differently from conventional forensic DNA searches. Normally, investigators compare a DNA sample against criminal databases such as CODIS, which contain profiles from convicted offenders or individuals previously arrested. But genetic genealogy expands the search far beyond those databases. The technique allows investigators to compare unknown DNA against large genealogy databases created by individuals who voluntarily submitted their genetic information for ancestry research. Millions of people have uploaded their DNA to services like these, and that means even if the person responsible for a crime has never submitted DNA themselves, a distant relative might have. If investigators identify a partial genetic match, they can begin building family trees. From there, they narrow the possibilities. Second cousins become first cousins become siblings, and eventually the pool of possible identities becomes small enough that investigators can begin focusing on specific individuals. This technique has solved several high-profile cold cases in recent years, but genetic genealogy takes time. Family trees must be constructed carefully, records must be verified, and investigators must ensure that the conclusions they reach are supported by multiple lines of evidence. While that forensic analysis continues, investigators are also facing another challenge common in complex cases: public perception. As time passes without an arrest, questions inevitably begin to emerge. Why hasn't anyone been identified? Why hasn't the pacemaker signal been found? And if there is DNA evidence, how long will it take before investigators can link it to a suspect? From the outside, it can sometimes appear as though an investigation has slowed down. But in reality, many cases enter a different phase after the initial surge of activity. The visible phase, search teams, helicopters, patrol units, eventually gives way to the analytical phase. This is where detectives begin connecting every piece of data collected during the early days of the case. Surveillance footage, digital records, forensic results, witness statements. Each piece of information must be cross-referenced against the others, and sometimes that process takes weeks or even months. But there is another reason investigators may be proceeding carefully: the possibility that more than one person was involved. Several analysts who have examined the publicly released information about the case have noted that certain aspects of the crime suggest planning. The masked individual appeared prepared. The approach to the home occurred during a very specific window of time, and according to investigators, there were no obvious signs that the suspect brought a cell phone close to the property during the critical moments of the crime. That kind of digital silence can indicate awareness of modern investigative techniques. It suggests the possibility that whoever committed the crime understood how cellular data can be used to track movements. And if that is the case, the operation may have involved more than one participant. In coordinated crimes, different individuals often perform different roles. One person conducts surveillance, another carries out the physical act, another provides transportation, and sometimes another individual assists with planning or communication. If multiple people were involved, that structure can initially make a crime more difficult to solve, but it can also create pressure, because coordination requires trust, and trust becomes harder to maintain as time passes, especially when forensic evidence is being analyzed, when digital data is being reconstructed. and when reward money is being offered for information. In cases involving multiple participants, investigations sometimes break open when one person begins to fear that the others will eventually expose them. That fear can lead to mistakes, and mistakes create evidence. But even without that possibility, investigators still have several powerful tools working in their favor. DNA analysis continues. Cell tower data continues to be reviewed. Vehicle movements captured on surveillance cameras are still being traced, and every new tip received by investigators is added to the growing pool of information surrounding the case. Somewhere within that data, investigators believe the answer exists, because cases like this rarely disappear completely. They leave traces. Sometimes those traces appear immediately, other times they take longer to emerge, but digital evidence has a unique quality. It does not fade, records remain. Signals are logged. Connections are stored in databases long after the events themselves have passed. Which brings the investigation back to the signal investigators are still searching for: Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker. If the device is still functioning, and medical technology suggests that it could be, it may still be broadcasting a signal somewhere in the desert, somewhere inside a structure, somewhere investigators have not searched yet. And if that signal is eventually detected, it could provide one of the most important breakthroughs in the case. Because wherever that pacemaker is located, it may reveal the final path Nancy Guthrie took after she disappeared. Until then, investigators continue analyzing the evidence. The search continues. The forensic work continues. And somewhere within the data, within the DNA, the digital records, or the signals still moving silently through the air, investigators believe the truth about what happened to Nancy Guthrie is waiting to be found.
Right now, somewhere, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker may still be transmitting, a small electronic signal repeating over and over again, a device designed for one purpose, to keep a human heart beating. But in this case, it may also be carrying something else, a clue. Investigators have already searched sections of the Arizona desert using specialized detection technology. Helicopters have scanned remote terrain looking for that signal, and so far, nothing has been found. But that doesn't mean the signal isn't out there. It only means the search hasn't reached the right place yet. Because investigations like this rarely hinge on a single breakthrough. They unfold piece by piece. Digital records are analyzed. DNA profiles are processed. Surveillance footage is reviewed frame by frame. And somewhere within that growing body of evidence, patterns begin to emerge. If Nancy's pacemaker is still transmitting, it represents more than just a medical device. It represents a marker in space, a signal that could eventually point investigators to a location that no witness has seen and no camera has captured. But the pacemaker is only one piece of the puzzle. The timeline from the night Nancy disappeared still raises critical questions. Why did the connection stop at exactly 2:28 a.m.? What happened during the minutes that followed? And who was the masked individual seen outside her home in the middle of the night? Investigators are still working through those questions. And while much of the investigation now happens behind the scenes, inside laboratories, data centers, and investigative task forces, the case remains active. Because somewhere within the evidence, the answer already exists. It may be hidden in DNA, it may be hidden in digital records, or it may still be broadcasting silently into the Arizona desert. Until that signal is found, the investigation continues. And when it does surface, whether through technology, forensic analysis, or someone coming forward with information, it may finally reveal what happened to Nancy Guthrie. If you want to follow developments in this case as investigators continue searching for answers, subscribe to the channel. Because when new information emerges, we will break it down here using the facts, the timelines, and the evidence that move this investigation forward.